Kiriko is the hero that launched with Overwatch 2, and for better or worse, has been associated with many of the negative connotations that Overwatch 2 provide. Problems with the skins, problems with mobility creep, and the general perceived unpunishability of the support class. And while some of those things are not exactly fair, it's fair to say at least that Kiriko is a very unpopular character, not just given her dominance in pro meta, but also just given how frustrating that she can be to play in ranked, even when she isn't all that strong. Today we're going to be talking about Kiriko because there's been a lot more discourse around this character as of recently, especially because of the public stats that have been provided to Overwatch 2 and the seemingly disconnected opinion of what the stats are saying and what people in ranked from really all ranks, but especially high ranks, are saying about the character. We're not just going to critique the design of Kiriko, but we're going to provide a couple of ideas of why this problem is not so easy to solve, as well as analyzing how we can interpret win rates and pick rates within the global context of Overwatch 2 stats. To be clear, I am not really a fan of Kiriko's design. I do think there's redeemable aspects to the character, but when we ask what needs to be changed with the character, it's really important that we actually address why people find her frustrating and why there's such a disconnect between her value output at the professional level and ranked if we're going to actually make effective changes. That being said, I don't think everyone's going to agree with me on this. I just want to at least bring some light to the arguments. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, so somebody sent me to this. I think it's time for us to talk a little bit, all right? So let me pull up the Twitter here. You know, Useful Blizzard Dev, it's the clown, Gavin Winter, in my Twitch chat right now. We don't nerf underpowered heroes very often. Just a real quick interjection here for context. Blizz Winter is Gavin Winter. He's one of their senior system designers. He's done a lot of work on things like hero bans and just hero information, a lot of the systems that we take for granted in Overwatch 2 nowadays. He's actually remarkably accessible and candid whenever he's in one of the streamers' Twitch chats. And so while I understand the frustration here from people that don't like this Kiriko situation, it seems pretty unfair and unintentionally toxic to call a dev that has absolutely zero impact on this thing for making what seems to be an offhanded joke. Direct your criticisms towards where they need to be criticized. This seems to me to be a little bit broad-brushed and not exactly considerate to a developer who's been more than generous with his time and answering questions in so many other facets. But anyway, back to the video. We don't nerf underpowered heroes very often. And then I kind of respond with a link to Kiriko's win rate. And Grandmaster right now, 47.7. And I'll pull it up right now. We can actually look at it. And even better, we could look at it within the context of all tiers, right? So she's actually even lower in all tiers, which makes sense. She's near the bottom, actually second lowest. And then if you go to Grandmaster, despite having a very high pick rate, same thing. She's the highest pick rate support. I believe she might be the highest pick rate character, period, in Grandmaster. And interestingly enough, she's also the highest pick rate support in all ranks as well, which is, you know, really interesting. Now, pick rate is not always correlated with strength. Historically, you have characters that are just really popular, really fun. I think Ana, Kiriko, Mercy, even when she's bad, very high pick rate, very fun. A lot of people like Juno, same reasons. More niche characters like Brigitte and Diari, even though they're actually pretty decent, not picked very high. Now, the way that these pick rates are done, we'll talk really quick about the statistics, and then we're going to jump into the history of Kiriko. Because this isn't just about the current state of Kiriko. This is like, we're going to go the whole, we're going to expose Kiriko's problem from now until the history of time. And one of the things about Overwatch's statistics, which have been out for about a couple months now, is that they are unmirrored win rates. So what that means, if you guys remember Marvel Rivals, and not to throw that game under shade, but I do want to give them credit for, I think, expediting the statistics website for Overwatch, right? And the problem with their stats, though, is they were unmirrored. And what that means is that when you looked at win rates of characters, the higher the pick rate, the closer you were to see something closer to a 50% win rate. Because in a mirrored match, obviously somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. It's a forced 50-50, right? And so what that means is, if I remember season 0, I think Mantis was like 58%, and she was like the second highest pick rate support, and they were not doing unmirrored. So what that means is that Mantis, if you didn't mirror her, probably had closer to like a 65-70% win rate. So it actually made the outliers in terms of how bad characters were or how good characters were look a lot more tame than it was. That's not the case with Overwatch. Like, what you see is what you get. 47.2, 47.7, whatever. This is non-mirrored win rates. In other words, this only tracks if the character is being played and is not picked by the other team. Obviously, playtime is also factored in. We're not going to bore you with the details right now, but this basically is a very, very accurate vision of how good of a character is, with a couple of notable exceptions. And we're going to talk about this one later. We're going to delve more into the stats later and why there's such a big gap about our understanding of Kiriko and her actual performance, as well as me actually agreeing that I don't think Kiriko is actually this bad. But there's a very important reason why that's the case, and we're going to talk more about that later. But for now, let me demonstrate a guide from a brilliant, handsome young man that was released, I want to say, like 2 to 3 days after Kiriko's release. And if you notice, what am I doing? This is like 2 days after release. I'm flanking, I'm off-angling, I'm Suzuing myself, I'm teleporting out, I'm healing my team on the side angle, right? Now, this doesn't really look like anything crazy, right? Like, of course, this is what you should be doing in Kiriko. Crazy mobility, most broken duelist in the game, insanely strong, obviously, right? Well, what made Kiriko's history so interesting is that this was actually in many ways not how she was played at the start, because this was how she was clearly intended to be played. If you guys remember the 2022 Kiriko Grand Finals, and Kiriko basically never was the person taking the angle. She was always the one, she was letting her Lucio maybe take the angle, but the reason why is because her healing was so incredibly overtuned that any sort of kit design that was revolving around, you know, getting more involved in the side angles and using your dueling was compromised because you just needed to heal on main. Her healing was too strong, her healing ult charge was too strong, and then just building the AFK farming the ult on your team, using your Suzu, and then using your ult on main was also too strong. And this entire meta revolved around Kiriko, and in such a weird way too. So I was actually, this was right at the tail end of my Overwatch League career and being involved in Overwatch League esports, and there were a lot of teams that actually ran Kiriko Tracer versus non-Kiriko compositions. You couldn't run non-dive because Kiriko would just go in with a flanker and kill you. But then as soon as it got to like Kiriko Mirror, well, then it was just about vomiting healing on main, letting your Lucio off angle. TLDR, she didn't play the way that she was supposed to be played. She didn't take space, she didn't take angles, and so on. Her healing was too strong. Her utility with Suzu was too strong on main. Cooldown reduction, everything was just way too strong. And if you notice, a lot of it's very passive angles, very little off-angling from her. Mostly just speed, push, pull, push, pull, push, pull, push, pull. Suzu to go in, Suzu to go out. Amp speed, Kitsune rush, everyone's moving fast, push, pull, pull. So I'll put a pin in that because we're going to come back to that one later. So TLDR, even though how she was intended design-wise to be played, and even often how she was more played and ranked, this did not carry over into the professional levels. Basically, everyone was grouping, cheating the game, playing around her sustain, playing around her healing, playing around her ult, playing around her Kitsune. A lot of the times because pro players were way better at communicating pushes and communicating disengages. The whole concept of map control in Overwatch 2 was compromised. Now, interestingly, this was not the first time that we had seen that. Junker, Queen, Goats. Have you guys heard of Jotes back in Overwatch 2? But basically the concept of Jotes was in Junker Queen's release. This is before Overwatch 2 went live. There was a composition that we used to call Jotes, which was Junker Queen, Brig, Lucio, Genji, Sojourn. And this also was a weird, unintuitive design because while Junker Queen did have team utility that was pretty valuable, her shout was so strong, sustain-wise, speed-wise, overhealth-wise, everything-wise, that it encouraged teams or discouraged teams from taking too deep off angles because you basically just played around your Junker Queen because you could just buff the crap out of you. And so there was this really weird dynamic with early in Overwatch 2 with both Kiriko and Junker Queen where you had two heroes that were designed to function slightly differently, but both of their designs in terms of like the way that their kit functioned with their ultimate or with their cooldowns or whatever actually broke the game. Overwatch 2 was all about off angles and spread and map control. And then Junker Queen comes in and says, no, just stay close. And Kiriko says, no, stay close. Even Malga Cardiac, that's another great example of a character that broke the system. Now, all of these things have been nerfed and changed, and we're more back to the traditional way that Overwatch 2 is supposed to be played. But the reason I said to put a pipe in that one, or put a pin in that one, is because that impression never really went away from the general public. Whether it was videos like Jake, who, by the way, was not wrong. He's absolutely right. Like this is how Fielder was playing it. But despite, healing nerfs, ult charge nerfs, ultimate value nerfs, 225, yeah, she has more HP, but now, and effective to the rest of her roster, she's a bit more fragile. That impression of how Kiriko should position and how she should play has kind of stayed the same. And even the impression from the community about how easy she is to play, because while Fielder did a really good job of picking up a brand new character and squeezing the value out of her quickly, the skill ceiling of the character just wasn't really that much. Just don't freaking miss your Suzu. Hit a couple of shots here and there, but don't freaking miss your Suzu. So a lot of the awkwards that came in later of taking an angle, 2-tap, teleport out, Yes, that's a very simple systematic approach as well, but that felt very foreign to a lot of people. And so a lot of Kiriko players got in their mind that this is how you need to be playing the game. Not what we're doing right now, which is helping an off angle, but just sit in the back and heal. Oh, it's so easy to climb with Kiriko. Now that's not the case anymore and hasn't been the case for years, but that's the impression. And then it dramatically shifted professional meta at that level of play. So we'll keep going on here. So Kiriko, she's broken, she's OP. She was also directly OP and ranked for sure. Absolutely OP and ranked. I mean, she was definitely exploited with the whole push-pull aspect, like being able to speed in or Kitsune in or Suzu your team out, right? That stuff was very much exploited more so by higher ranks. Again, put a pin in that one too. But she was very overtuned and ranked as well. She gets nerfed, but one thing people started to notice once the whole off-angle playstyle, aka awkward, once people started to realize that this is how Kiriko kind of was designed to be played, I mean, you can see it here. Old coach mechanics. I mean, what the frick, guys? Like, it's just not punishable. You take an off angle here, and getting forced out of an angle is a really bad thing for a Kiriko, right? It means that your value is lost a lot, at least once she was balanced. But it's very hard to die in an angle. Very, very, very hard to die in an angle because it's Suzu. Now, should you be Suzuing yourself on an angle? Well, you want to avoid doing that. But if it happens, well, better than dying. Right? Better than dying, right? Teleport out, Suzu out, right? Better than dying, right? So my point is that one of the things that was immediately pointed out with Kiriko wasn't just the problem with that, the professional meta kind of warped our opinion of the character, but even if you played her quote unquote correctly, people were like, this character just doesn't die. Like, she just making her make a mistake is just clearing her out of an off angle. It's not actually killing her. And if you guys have seen any of my other gameplay critiques, even discussions with Mercy players, with Roadhog players, and so on, one of the most important problems that a lot of badly designed characters have, if we want to call Kiriko badly designed, is that punishment doesn't always result in death. It's you lost a resource trait, so your team will suffer for it. But it's really unsatisfying for your team to deal with it that way. And it's also really unsatisfying to play into a Kiriko. Like, forcing a Kiriko off of an angle, forcing Suzu and teleport is very valuable, but it's not very satisfying. I want to result in the dopamine of me actually securing the kill, and it's not satisfying for me to do that. And so even if Kiriko was better designed, better balanced after her initial launch, so that she actually had to take angles and take risks, she still wasn't dying. Isn't the same true of Tracer? No, absolutely not. Tracer has the capability of outplaying your survivability through skill play and maneuverability that still results in oftentimes even high-level Tracers just dying. Kiriko doesn't. And she also has to manipulate in ranges to where the risk is inherently higher. Kiriko does not. So the problem with Kiriko is that even in a more quote-unquote healthy state of Overwatch 2, now later on, she's still a character that has an incredibly slender hitbox, has a invulnerability cooldown, a cleanse, which frustrates a lot of other people in other ways, and then lives by just walking away from an angle. And so what happens is you have a character that is objectively really strong in a 1v1 if she has all of her cooldowns, loses a 1v1 by simply using her valuable cooldown and leaving, but without dying, and who the general impression of the community tends to overvalue her impact on standing behind a tank and healing. If you've ever watched high-level Kiriko, generally the Lucio will go in the off-angle, Kiriko will stay with tank, but if you've ever watched a gold Kiriko, they're going to stand right next to the support, standing right behind the enemy tank, farming heals, farming Kitsune, and everybody on Twitter is going to tell you that that's going to climb you all the way up to Masters. And it's just not true. And I've coached this game, and I've coached Kiriko enough to know that that's not the case. And it's objectively not the case, because we're going to look at some statistics in a second. But that's the impression. Can't lose in a 1v1. Forcing out of the angle doesn't even result in that much of an opportunity cost. What the frick is this character? So, this is where we're going to take a look at some statistics. And we're going to look at some statistics a little bit more in depth here. Kiriko has been consistently played in professional meta at the highest ranks because the value of a cleanse, Suzu, invulnerability, Kitsune Rush, teleport through walls, very, very, very powerful if you can coordinate that at the professional level. If you guys were here last week, we talked about the big difference between Grandmaster, Champion, and Pro Play, just even at the highest level, is the whole concept of coordinating speed pushes, speed disengage, push pulls, whatever. You just have to watch almost basically any professional meta, whether it was Mauga or Kiri Lucio, Hazard, or Diva, Zarya, any meta. It's why Kiriko Lucio are constantly being played, is the ability to push pull. And that's just something that happens a lot less in ranked, which is why he hit scan, and characters like Ana, Zenyatta, slower characters in both DPS support and tank, are generally not
as strong in pro play, but are stronger in ranked. Because in ranked, you hold angles and you just kind of hold. You don't back up and push. We've talked about that a lot. I'm not going to talk about that in detail. I have a video about that elsewhere. But TLDR, that's why Kiriko does so well in pro play. Timing of Suzu, being able to disengage, Kitsune rush, all that kind of stuff, very, very valuable. But that just does not happen in Grandmaster Champion. The problem is that will absolutely influence people's impression of Kiriko, especially when it becomes seen as this character never dives. That frustrates me. Therefore, this character must be overtuned. You see what I'm saying? So when when a character is overtuned in a 1v1 fashion, it is extremely easy to overinflate that character's value. So, I mean, let me give you guys an example, right? We've seen this over and over again with Roadhog, with Ramatra, unkillable, unbeatable, Orisa, unbeatable, unkillable, unbeatable, Malga at times, right? Even Wrecking Ball right now, he's absolutely been overtuned for a while, but there's so many characters in Overwatch in the tank roster. I mean, we can keep going, right? People's impressions of Tracer at times in their past. Now, that was more accurate recently, but in the past, right? And certainly in the support category, right? Never can kill Moira, never can kill Kiriko, whether it's low rank, pro, whatever else. Weaver just sits in the back and heals. It's obnoxious, whatever. The point being is that we also always vastly overstate the value of just simply living. And that is exacerbated by a bunch of Grandmaster and Champion players that see professional level play, see the value and utility that a professional level Kiriko is getting, and then conflating that to something that we should be picking and ranked. And by the way, this is after a recent Kiriko nerf, so keep that in mind. But you can look up the historical data. Is it owtic.gg? And we've been watching Kiriko win rates for months now. She has never been above, I think, a 49%, 50% win rate in Grandmaster Champion in like the last 3 or 4 months, I believe. Might be wrong on that, but she's definitely been in the bottom half. So the question is why? Why do we people continue to pick her when she's not overperforming? We've already established why she feels like she's performing, because being unkillable is really strong, because the higher rank impression is absolutely that she's good in professional play, and that is absolutely right, I think. But in ranked, those things don't happen, and we can't kill her, and it's obnoxious, and her hitboxing is annoying. I think the other thing to consider in other ranks is that she's absolutely a character that is very visually appealing, and a lot of people enjoy playing her, so her pick rate will be inflated from that. But why? Why is he so incredibly bad? And so this is kind of where we have to talk about, is it harder to land an impactful Suzu than it looks? Is part of the frustration playing versus her a part of just how good she is in a 1v1? Is it also with how consistent that she is? So time kind of chimes in here. I definitely do think that Kiriko is objectively the most consistent character in terms of maps and matchups. I don't think she has any bad maps or masters. I do think sniper maps are probably her weakest, but she's not trash. So I think here is my opinion. I'm going to say 2 things about the Grandmaster Champion Kiriko players. 3 things, okay? One is a really low-hanging fruit that I think it doesn't matter the rank from Bronze to Grandmaster. I still don't think Kiriko's understand angle, map control, space control. I don't think support players as a whole take enough angles as they need to, intelligently, wisely, and that absolutely deflates characters' win rates who need to be taking angles. I've talked about this at length with certain characters like Mei, even Symmetra prior to some of the recent stuff, where a lot of people it is partly skill issue. You just need to be taking angles with Kiriko. And a lot of support players do not do that. And they certainly don't do it enough. And so even though a Grandmaster Kiriko is absolutely taking angles, they probably aren't taking them enough and doing them well enough. So that's absolutely a problem. I think the second thing that's a big problem with Kiriko as well is, as I said, I do think that she is seen as a solution character. Now, when I brought up Orisa, Ramatra, or I brought up Moira, do you notice that these characters aren't just seen as survivable, but they're also seen as solution characters? Let me give you guys an example. Orisa down here, right? Bastion in low ranks, absolutely seen as a solution character. There's a problem, aka usually a tank or a backliner that we can't kill. Can we please go? Or I'm dying multiple times, so I guess I need to swap Moira. Now, the funny thing about that is we generally venerate high ranks, but high ranks are just as vulnerable to the exact same biases. They just are not always immediately obvious. Let me give you guys an example. You guys ready for the most oppressive solution character in lower ranks? Cassidy. Cassidy is the high ranks, sorry. Cassidy is the default solution character for high ranks. Or Sojourn. Sojourn or Cassidy. Comfort fallbacks that chronically have overperformed over the last few months since they're 225, 250 HP. But yet there's going to be the default swap when things are feeling a little bit difficult because it feels safe. I can at least put out some consistent damage. Maybe I can punish the dive. And yet they're just not good. They're just not good. They won't pick Bastion because, you know, we're not like those bronze, silver, gold players, but they fall for the exact same traps, right? I think we've even seen that at times with even Hazard, even Ramatra at times. But this gets spicy when you think about support, okay? Kiriko is the quintessential, probably even more so than Cassidy Sojourn. She is the quintessential solution-based character in Grandmaster. We just need Suzu, bro. Why are we not running Kiri? She's so freaking overtuned. We need Suzu. Our support ults are so bad. Why are we running Life Weaver, bro, in the year of our Lord 2025, bro? Why are we on Zen, dude? Why are we on Ana? This is not a dive meta. Just go Kiri, bro. Just go Kiri. How many times have you guys heard that? Literally turn on, like, I swear, like any Western streamer for 2 seconds, and that's, you instantly hear that, bro. Instantly. It's constant all the time. Just play Kiri, bro. Just sit in the back and heal and hit the Suzu. It's so easy. Just farm Kitsune. It's so good. We've already known that to be incorrect, right? But what that also implies is, as we've seen, Overwatch can be a snowbally game. It's not a criticism. All games are snowbally, whether it's emotional snowball, ultimate snowball, map control snowball. And so if you swap to a character that is seen as a solution, crucially, I'm not even criticizing the swap. Maybe it is better, but you're already on the back foot. And if Kiriko is not the character that you started with, but more often the character that a lot of supports do swap to, then that is going to deflate her win rate. She's going to be tanked by a noticeable margin by 40% of support players that swap to her when things aren't going well. So there's a real question here of maybe Kiriko is actually decent, because maybe Kiriko is like, okay, I wouldn't say that this is going to affect her win rate by that much. I don't have any specific numbers, but I would guess anywhere 1, 2, 3%. But it's going to impact her win rate because she is seen as a solution character. And as we've already seen, it's just she's not good enough. And I think that's a very interesting question that we have to ask is, who's at fault here? Are we looking at win rates too literally without considering the context of when that character is swapped to? Or is the player base too intelligent to read in when swapping actually makes sense? And the other problem is if you didn't start playing Kiriko, I'm immediately suspicious of your ability to play Kiriko. If you're a Mercy player, I don't know if I trust you to play Kiriko, unless you know how to off angle and you've got decent mechanics. I mean, I'm not just saying that as a Mercy. What if it's an Ana player? Just because you can play mechanics with Ana, do you know how to off angle with Kiriko? What about Lucio? I don't know, right? It's not just a criticism of the mechanical side of things. It's also, you got to know how to position. You got to know how to hold space. And that is uniquely difficult. But our impression of Kiriko is that you don't have to do that correctly. You just have to hit. And that is so incredibly wrong. So incredibly wrong. Yeah, just go Ana into Hog or Malga, dude. It's just free win. No. Unless you know what you're doing, no. So Kiriko, again, I want to highlight this, and then we could have a similar conversation for Orisa and other characters as well. But the TLDR is that, like, this is not a solution character. This is not a solution character. Certainly not as much as people think in Grandmaster Champion. Certainly in all ranks, certainly more than that as well. But I'll go spicier than that. You guys ready for this one? Western players do not or vastly overestimate the value of Kiriko in all compositions in all situations. Things like Suzu, teleport, ranged damage, ranged heal are infinitely more valuable in situations where dive is generally going to be a little bit stronger. More mobile characters are going to be a little bit stronger. It's very valuable, right? But if you look at the Asia win rate with Kiriko, okay, you're going to notice that she's actually doing okay. She's not unbelievably oppressive, but she's doing very good. Like, that's very solid. It's on par with a couple of other sports. It's solid, right? But if you look at the tank role, you'll notice that characters like Winston, if we just look at pick rate, Winston, Doomfist, dominating in Grandmaster and Champion, right? If we go to pick rate again, Genji, Tracer, right? Sojourn. This is despite Genji Tracer nerfs, right? Very high pick rates. I mean, they're not even super, super good, right? If you look at win rates, right? Like, Tracer's not even in the top 3 anymore in Asia. But then you compare that to America, and you'll still see Tracer being picked a lot, but all of a sudden we start to see a little bit more hit scan, and then this is the big stinker here. If you look here, Winston's still pretty high pick rate, right? But all of a sudden you start to see a lot more Queen, a lot more Diva, a lot more Zarya, a lot more Risa. Doomfist drops a lot. Winston is still lower than he is in Asia. Less than half, okay? Less than half, right? 40% of what he is. A lot of what happens here is it's really easy to go, yeah, well, kind of what Cithiel is saying, funnily enough, is like, oh, they're just bad. So my point here is that Kiriko is somewhat compositionally at the highest ranks dependent, a little bit. Certainly so. Not just skill gap, but she is the most flexible support, as I said, but still. So you ready for another important conclusion, in my opinion? I think Kiriko's value in non-dive compositions is vastly overestimated. I'm not saying that as a plat Kiriko player, you should swap out for Kiriko, but as a Grandmaster player, you should stop screaming for Kiriko in every situation on every map, when you probably should just be playing BAP or Idiari or, oh boy, Mercy. You know what I'm saying? Wuyong. Heck freaking Ana. So the reason why this matters is I'm gonna kind of target both the design team with this one and the community. I'm gonna start with the design team here first, okay? Design team needs to remember that people really hate playing versus characters that don't get punished with death, whether they're support, damage, or tank. It just doesn't feel right. And so it doesn't matter if they lost indirect value and that we win the fight. Yay, we. But I want kill. I want kill. I don't care if we lose. I want kill. And I don't think that that's a stupid thing to ask for. I think that's what we're playing for. We're playing for the dopamine of winning a 1v1. And I'm not saying that all characters need to not have get out of jail free cards. I mean, every character in some way or shape or form generally has a defensive cooldown in some way. But Kiriko's definitely is on the line of absurd, especially because her utility and her teleport feel like they have so little drawbacks in the 1v1, not to mention her hitbox and so on. Every single aspect of her kit means that if she blows literally everything on the duel, she's really bad, but she's incredibly, she just wins the 1v1. It's like if BAP blows both shift and lamp and everything else, but in theory, he's still there, you know? Kiriko can do that and have her cake and eat it too. And there's a lot of other heroes that have that problem as well, and I think that's kind of like, that really elaborates my point, right? There's a lot of tanks and DPS that are also like that, and those are also not fun to play versus either. So we gotta be really careful about utility that is strictly through their survivability that, yeah, they could use it on your team, but if you blow it on yourself, you're unkillable and unpunishable. No, characters need to be punishable. They need to be punishable. Even if they have a lot of tools, they need to be punishable, number one. Number two, from a design perspective, I think this is really where we need to take a second and look at our support utility as a whole. This is more of a professional critique of like how the entire cast is, where we just have too many gosh darn low skill ceiling supports. Now, I know specifically that the thing that Kiriko provides is a little bit harder to put a nail on, aka the speed, invulnerability, mobility combo that makes her characters like her, to a lesser extent Lucio, and so on, even stuff like the Juno when she was paired to the Brigade. Like, it feels hard to match that value, but it is really worth highlighting that there is just not a lot of competition at the professional, pro Overwatch player level for the level of utility that Kiriko, Lucio, and so on provide. There just isn't a lot to bring to the table, right? Like, there's just, the competition isn't there. There's a lot of really easy, low skill ceiling supports, aka Mercy, aka Lifeweaver, even characters like, you're gonna hate me for it, Idiari, they just don't bring anything to the table. Moira doesn't bring anything to the table. And then there's characters that do have capabilities, but just haven't been quite strong enough or haven't had enough of their like Ana Brigitte, they just don't have the movement in them. Now, I'm not saying that they should have the movement in them, but they probably should be able to provide something as compensation. And when you have a 14-second cooldown on Ana, and your Brigitte still has a delay in her shield thing, that's kind of frustrating. And so she's not going to be played. They're not going to be played. You know, so there's just a lot of supports that just don't have the same level of value ceiling output. It's not just the skill ceiling. I think characters like Ana has just as high of a skill ceiling as Kiriko, if not higher. But the value just isn't there. It just isn't there. And so pro players are going to continually bias towards stuff that is consistently valuable when you know how to do the perfect thing coordinated. And there's just a lot of support heroes that just don't do that. So that's my hero design. Yeah, please let supports be punishable. Please let support, because you're going to deal with people's impressions that they're wildly OP because they're not punishable. We saw that for a long time with Orisa. People for a long time thought Orisa was way stronger than she actually was. I'm talking about literal year, because of how unbelievably annoying she was to play against and how unbelievably unkillable she was. The other aspect, this is the community feedback, and I don't put a lot of responsibility on the community because it's, you know, you respond with what you're given, you know, but for my community, the people watching this video or in my stream right now, remember that survivability is overstated, and that Kiriko, in terms of value consistently, and Kiriko is not an auto win button. You need to not only be taking angles in space with her, but you also need to make sure that your teleport Suzu are not getting forced easily and given away for free, because the angle that you give away the character is extremely, extremely expensive. And then as a community, We need to stop crying about how overpowered Kiriko is and start to say more along the lines of why this character feels overpowered, and that's frustrating. And if you're a Grandmaster Champion player, stop asking your EDRE guy on freaking Busan Sanctuary to go Kiriko because Suzu's OP. You're losing games because of that. Let them play what they want. Play Kiriko in situations when it makes sense. Play her if you want to play her. She's very flexible, but she's not an auto win button. And I really think that the discourse around this has been like really, really muddled, because I don't really care about Twitter stuff too much, because you know what? Twitter is Twitter. People are going to stuff, even the way the algorithm works, the more inflammatory, the more nonsense that's being said, it's just going to blow up, right? So I don't really care. But it is a very common sentiment across everywhere that, oh, Kiriko is so overpowered. She is overstacked. She's got way too many things in her kit that go in way too many different directions, but she's just objectively not overpowered and hasn't been for a long time in any rank. And so the challenge needs to come from a feedback perspective of, this character feels overtuned. This needs to change. And I think that's a good point. And I think there's a lot that they need to and can do with Kiriko's utility. I think so much of her invulnerability through Suzu, teleport through walls, they would have to do more into her heal resource with more utility. There's a lot of more things with it. So take angles, do stuff with Kiriko. But I just think like in her current state, with how oppressively strong she is in certain 1v1s and how quickly that she can get out of this without dying, I just don't think there's an easy solution with her current state. But I guess the reason why I'm making this video is not only to kind of raise awareness to the issue a little bit, but also I really want to stop. I'm tired of talking with people that are really happy to throw out statistics until it proves that they're wrong, and then they refuse to engage with the statistics. Now, I already said that the statistics have nuance here, because we don't know. This does factor in people that swap to Kiriko mid-match when things are going poorly. So that definitely deflates it a little bit. But the stats are there. So when you're asking why certain changes aren't being made, for me, it's less about why is Kiriko not getting nerfed. It's like more why is Kiriko not getting changed. You understand what I'm saying? Why do you highlight so much on Kiriko not being a win button here when there's just no heroes like that in general? Because that is absolutely the sentiment culturally in the higher ranked Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, Twitch, whatever. It's absolutely the sentiment. So if that's not in your experience, then great, congratulations. But that is absolutely the sentiment, literally everywhere else. There you go. I've always been of the opinion, like, if we're like, I mean, you guys have heard me talk about Kiriko before. I would love healing to be on a resource, 3 Ofuda. So you throw 1 heal resource. It takes like, it's like Doomfist punch. It takes time to recharge. Oh, but she already has that. No, she doesn't. It literally does not functionally change what she does whatsoever. It takes like 4 or 5 seconds to regenerate. It provides a heal over time, maybe a cooldown reduction or a speed boost. Something where you have to actually think about what you're healing, who you're healing. I think Suzu should be on a longer cooldown. I don't think it should give him vulnerability. I think it probably also should not give intention ability either. They probably should give some form of speed boost. There should be on a 10-second or 12-second cooldown. She should not be able to teleport through walls. If she should, it should be significantly reduced in the distance if you do go through a wall. There's just so many questions that we have to ask about how can we make her feel more punishable, more risky. But yeah, this is really not, I want to be clear, this is not a Kiriko advocacy. This is like very specific. I do not like Kiriko's current design, but the reason why I do these kind of discussions is why I'm trying to get to the heart of the issue, so that whatever feedback that we give is actually useful. Because you have to understand why they're not just sledgehammer nerfing Kiriko. You just can't do that. Like, you couldn't, she would be a throw pick. Like, you couldn't do that. And there's a lot of characters that have the exact same problem. I'm not saying the devs are, they've kind of created this problem a little bit with her design, where it just feels really awkward to deal with that, So, yeah, I mean, the reality is the vast majority of the community is very slow to learn things. Very slow to learn things. I wish we had pick rate statistics on Orisa, because I would be very interested to see how her pick rate has slowly fallen over time, if it has fallen. But I think it's taken people a long while to figure out that she's not quite as strong as people thought she was. But the average rank player just doesn't check patch notes. They don't watch Twitch streamers with bad hair ranting about patch notes and game design. They don't give a frick. They log in after the 9 to 5 to play a couple of ranked games and log off and feel bad or feel good. So the reason I'm having this Kiriko conversation is because that's why I went back to 2022, because there's still a lot of players that still think that, right? So it's just kind of the impression, right? When Flats rants about the Orisa, Ramatra, OP, Malga stuff, he wasn't wrong at the time, but that was a long time ago. People still think that that's the case nowadays, That's the Kiriko discussion. TLDR, I think Kiriko is very strong in professional meta and will remain very strong in professional meta because of her kit. that is not as fully exploited even in higher ranks, and is probably overstated in situations that aren't necessarily her strength. And that I also think that her win rate is a bit deflated due to her pick rate when people are picking her. But crucially, I don't think she's as oppressive as people think objectively outside of the 1v1s, because people tend to look at Overwatch with missing the bigger picture of what a character can provide. Not to mention a lot of even lower ranked players still having their opinion of a character's play style, gameplay loop tainted by the way that she could have been played in situations 3 years ago. More than 3 years ago. Can you look at a 66 test? I can't. That would be super interesting though. Kiriko would be weird. Kiriko, I can't tell if she'd be worse or better in 66. Kitsune has to be stronger, but your matchup versus tanks isn't as good.